One of the challenges with traveling a lot in vehicles or living out of vehicles, whether we're talking vans, RVs, travel trailers, cargo trailer conversions, whatever you're working with, is climate control and temperature control. Obviously in the summer, that means it can get really hot. Even if you're getting up into the mountains, it can get hot. So we're in Wyoming right now. Summertime, we can get into the 90s for extended periods of time, and it can get really, really uncomfortable. But even if you go up to the mountains, it's cooler, but the sun is really, really intense at that point, and it can still be pretty hot. So that requires like some kind of cooling system. That's actually harder to pull off grid. Wintertime, you get the cold, and we're in Wyoming, and it's the middle of December as we're recording this video, and we were just out earlier this week for several days doing some winter camping, and the temperatures were dipping as low as 15 degrees overnight, which is chilly. So you got to have a way to generate some heat. And fortunately, heat is actually easier to deal with and to generate off-grid than cooling is. So what we've been using, I've used off and on over the years, is a Mr. Heater Portable Buddy. They're cheap. They work. They do not require any electricity at all, so all you need is propane, and they work. There are some things I don't like about them. You have an open flame, which is a fire hazard. You have an open flame, which is burning and emitting carbon monoxide and potentially and other things in your vehicle. So you have to vent. They pump a lot of moisture into the air in a small space. So you're already putting moisture into the air by breathing. Every time you exhale, you're putting moisture into the air. And every time you cook, every time you heat water for tea or coffee or a hot water bottle to put on your achy joints or to try and help stay warm with, you're putting more moisture into the air. So then your heater's putting moisture into the air as well. They also only tend to last about a year in my experience before they fail, and I think that's in part because they're bouncing down the road. So I'm not trying to knock on Mr. Heater products. I think my understanding is they were designed for like sheds, garages, ice fishing shacks, that sort of thing, and they've just been co-opted by van lifers and RVers and stuff, and there are some unique challenges there that I don't think is really the best option. Maybe in an emergency backup thing, but not something I want to be using consistently. So we've been considering our options, and we finally decided to take the plunge on a diesel heater. Now, I know a lot of people who have used these over the years. I've also seen plenty of videos with people who had them and some had challenges with them, getting them set up or getting them operational. Seems like most people make out pretty good with them. We're going to give it a try. The challenges are one of the things that held me back from doing it so far. The Mr. Heater Portable Buddy you can pick up for under $100 at just about anywhere that sells that sort of stuff. Home Depot, Menards, Walmart, Tractor Supply, all kinds of Lowe's, all kinds of places. And that's one of the nice things about them is you can get them anywhere. So if it conks out, we had one actually last winter, January. We were traveling from Wyoming down to the desert, and we made it to Rawlins, Wyoming, and the Prius broke down. Fortunately, it was nothing big, just the 12-volt starting battery, engine battery conked out. But we couldn't get one in Rawlins, Wyoming. We had to wait, and we were fortunately able to go the next day, so we ended up stuck there. It was cold. We just had spent the night before at Independence Rock in Wyoming, which is west of Casper, kind of between Casper and Rawlins. It was 5 degrees overnight. We were looking at more of that weather, and then Mr. Heater didn't want to work because it was about a year old, and it was just not working. So we ended up staying in the parking lot of a Tractor Supply. We walked over to Tractor Supply and bought a brand new Mr. Heater Portable Buddy for like $70 or $80. So that's the great thing about them. And like I said, they are cheap. This thing, we just order. You have to pretty much get them online and order them. We ordered this from Amazon, this Vevor diesel heater, and they call these car parking heaters a lot. But anyway, we ordered this, and I got it for less than $100 because I did order it on Black Friday. So normally it's about $100 or a little more than $100, but quite inexpensive still. And we're going to try and get this thing set up. These do come in a couple of different styles. You can get this one is all independent pieces that we have to put together. You can get them now in a case or a box. Everything's pre-assembled. All you have to do is run your fresh air intake and your exhaust vent out, and you're all good to go. We went with this option so we have more flexibility. But we're going to get this installed today in the van because it's in the 40s, so we'll take advantage of that. And next time we go camping, we'll have hopefully a more reliable heat system. I'm going to wait this thing opened up. We're opening up inside because it's still in the 30s outside, even though fortunately the sun's shining. And here's my little pocket Cutco knife that my lovely wife gave to me. A little gentleman style knife instead of my usual more redneck, heavy duty stuff. So we'll get this opened up and take a look at it. We'll see what's here. And then as soon as it warms up a few more degrees outside, we'll move the van to a more suitable spot and we'll try and get this thing installed. All right, I'm going to drop this on the floor because there ain't room for me and the box in this trailer. The trailer is bigger than the van, but we'll still run out of room real quick in a hurry. Manual for a diesel heater. We'll check this out. Everybody I've ever seen unbox, not just from Vevor, but from any brand, says the manuals are of marginal utility because of the, you know, how they're written. So, we have color pictures though, at least. Vevor does seem to be one of the more popular of these. There's a chart with an internal structure of the heater assembly. They have a couple of different models here that are all substantially similar. I went with the 8 kilowatt model. Now, I know a lot of people who are putting these things in vans go with 2 kilowatt or 5 kilowatt. This is my first diesel heater, so I do not have a good metric on how much energy heat we're going to get out of this thing. So I went with the 8 kilowatt. Why? Because, as I was saying, just the other night we were camping at 15 degrees. We have a high top, so we have more space to heat. I want to make sure we got enough power. I guess we'll run it on, turn it down, or open a window if we got too much heat. Fuel tank. You got to have one of these. This is where all the diesel fuel goes. These things are designed so you can put screws in here and mount it, or bolts and mount it onto a surface like a wall. There's the cap. It does have a pinhole in it to allow venting. Otherwise, if you're pumping fuel out, you'll end up collapsing the container because of the pressure. So that's it. There's our fuel line parts we're going to need. Basically, you see there's no out for this. We have an innie to put fuel in. We do not have an outie to get fuel out. So we have to mount a fuel outlet either here or here on this side, one of the two. So not too big of a deal. You have to drill a hole and install that thing, which we'll get to in a few moments. There's a bag full of parts, including a muffler that I think these are often called silencers, exhaust silencers, but it's sort of a muffler. It's not very fancy. Not much to it, but apparently it does make the exhaust sound a little bit quieter, and you can see right through it. So it's a straight through pipe. Weep hole here, or drain hole, for any condensation, so you want to make sure you mount this down so that any condensation that forms in here, which happens in your car exhaust too, drips out. That's why if you do a lot of short trips with your car or truck, your exhaust will run off a lot faster. If you do longer trips, it gets good and hot and cooks off all that condensation in there. And this is a mounting plate that goes underneath the heater. More parts. Kind of looks like a box of vacuum cleaner parts at a quick glance. So, what do we got here? These are ducts, register ducts, if you will. These allow you to get the heat from the heater assembly itself to wherever you want it to go. And we got 2 of these. This is the exhaust vent, kind of like the exhaust pipe on your car. It is a flex tube. One end attaches to the heater, the other end goes to the floor or through the wall to outside. These do get hot, so you have to be careful how you install them, that you're not burning anything that's in contact with it. This is there we go. We'll go with this one first. This is the air intake tube. This brings in fresh air for combustion, and this is a filter that goes on the end of the tube outside of your vehicle to allow fresh air to come in. It kind of filters it a little bit, keeps hopefully rodents and other critters from coming up into your heater system. Fuel line to run the fuel from the tank to the heater assembly itself. There's quite a bit of tube there, more than we're going to need, I think, for however we're doing it. Wiring to connect everything. One parts for the fuel pump and parts for the heater itself. You do have to have some electricity to run this. Most of the power is going to be for the fan, and these are quite efficient. They do not use a lot of fuel, and they do not use a lot of electricity. They need some, but not a lot. This is the fuel pump. This is got little plastic caps on it to keep it clean, because you don't want crud getting in your fuel pump. So we're going to get this hooked up. Again, this is a 12-volt pump, and this will move the fuel from the tank into the burner assembly at the pressure that it needs. These are just, we got a fuel filter in here, and we've got some hose clamps and zip ties, and yeah. Oh, this is actually interesting. This one now actually has a hose clamps. This is a exhaust wrap. So I did not expect that. It's an exhaust pipe insulation sleeve, they're calling it. And the idea is it goes over the exhaust pipe here, and that's going to insulate it a bit to reduce the chances of the exhaust pipe overheating something and catching something on fire. I have seen people install these and go to the auto parts store and get a wrap, exhaust wrap. So this is actually including one else. That's a nice touch that I was not expecting. So far not bad for like 90 bucks. So here's the heater. I believe this is the end the hot air comes out of. 99% sure of that. This would be the return air. And on the bottom here, we got a gasket too. I don't remember seeing those before. So this is the electrical connection for the heater. There is some circuitry in here to make everything happen. There's also a glow plug that needs electricity, just like in a diesel engine. On the bottom here, this is our exhaust port, combustion exhaust port. This is our combustion air intake. And this is with a red cap on it. This is the fuel inlet. So these are going to be mounted most commonly through the floor, like so. You can also raise it up on blocks or on brackets and have a little more room to work with. You can run them off the side and go through a wall or something if you want. But that's the heater, so not too big. But we also have a controller. This is the electronic controller that runs everything. I think it probably goes this way, actually. And it is on a little thing here, a little bracket, so you can, hopefully, there we go. You can mount this onto the wall, and then that can snap on. So, and it also comes with a little key fob controller, so we can run it with a remote. So does that matter? I don't know. A lot of these have an app too. I don't know if this one has one, and I don't know if I would bother using the app. So we took this apart inside because it's a little chilly this morning. First thing we have to do before we decide to install before we actually install it is figure out where we're going to put it. So I've got several possible ideas. I have my default plan for how we did the build, but until you get the thing in your hands and you can see how big it is, and you can see exactly how big the fuel tank is, you're not sure exactly if it's going to fit, I guess. So we're going to see where it's going to fit best for our needs, and we're going to make sure that we can actually install it there. There's nothing in the way. So we're out at the van right now. I'm playing around with a few ideas for where this diesel heater may be installed. So let me show you what I'm thinking so far and what I might end up doing. So I have a few possible ideas. One is in our kitchen area here. This was my initial thought when we were doing this build, was to put the diesel heater in here. To accommodate the heater and the tank. The tank would mount nicely on this wall, and if I flush mount it on the front, there's still room to close the door and everything, but then we can open the door and have plenty of room to access the fuel tank for filling it up. I had also thought it's a mess right now because we really haven't finished getting things organized in here, but behind the driver's seat, we kind of tuck it a little bit under the seat. The catch over there is that there's no good way to put the position of the tank for refilling. This is just really tight along the driver's seat here, and even if I slide the seat forward, there's still not really going to be room to get in there to a tank to refill it, and I'm almost certainly going to have dripping diesel over time on the seatbelt and stuff, which is going to stink. So I have to rule out this one behind the seat, although it would be nice because it's kind of a wasted spot, more or less, wasted space, so more or less. And I had considered either mounting the fuel tank on the back door here, or potentially even on the inside of the door. One concern I have with that is the fuel line being flexed and moved a lot. But I really don't have room underneath at my little desk here. I really don't have room underneath here to mount the heater. I was just putting it in here in a few different positions, and between needing room for the ends of it, it just doesn't really work out well. And of course, this is our Mr. Heater portable buddy. Is just running right now, trying to warm up the Bluetti so I can recharge that while we're back in town, because it's been so cold that it won't charge because of the lithium battery. Okay, so all this to say that probably this is the best of those three options. It deals with the problem of the fuel tank. We could also mount it on this side if we wanted to. This thing fits in here pretty nicely. The only problem I'm having is underneath, because of the way the van's designed here. If I flush mount this thing with a cabin in the front, we have the room for the air in the back. We look underneath here where we got to put these protrusions through to the outside, the fresh air intake and the exhaust. They land right on this junction here, which is this point. So that's going to be a challenge. If I move it forward far enough to clear that, then we're out here sticking out in the front into this floor space, or hallway space, so to speak, and you can see how it sticks out there. So another potential option, now I'm having to think of beyond the three scenarios I originally envisioned, is in this section of the kitchen cabinet area. This is where we've been storing our gray tanks. So if I move this over here, that solves my problem with the floor, with the protrusions being in the wrong spot, and it could go in here. Well, either like this or on this side might be better, because either way, that fits in there nicely. There's still space to work with. The only other idea I'm coming up with here so far is moving to the back a little bit. This is where we have our fridge, the set power fridge, and underneath that we have this little shelf. We also have that's the wheel well, so we kind of have a little bit of storage on the wheel well there. But I'm thinking we could put it in here and mount it lengthwise. Right now we've just been using this for water bottle storage with the gallon jugs, but I think this could work pretty nicely for the heater as well. So that's a pretty good shot. Now, of course, the catch with all of this is I have to get underneath the van and make sure that there's nothing in the way in this spot or in this spot. The fuel tank's on the other side, the gas tank's on the other side, so that may work out okay. One of these is probably going to be the way to go, but I'm going to go check with the wife before I make a decision on that. Okay, so I'm down here crawling around on the ground, and I think either of those A, B, and C are not working. I think D and E options will work. The one, if it's mounted sideways in the van, it should come through up here, through the floor up there, which would be fine. And if I mount it under where we have the water bottles now, in front of the wheel well, this is the wheel well here. Now, this is horrible to show, but that's the wheel well. There we go, wheel well, and this right here, it'll be inside of the wheel well. So as long as I miss this frame cross member here, it should come down up in here, through the floor up in here, which again should be fine. So I'll check with Melanie, see what she thinks, if she has a preference between those two positions. Well, I'm back. Ran in and checked with Melanie. She actually had food cooking, so we grabbed a quick bite to eat, and now I'm back at this. Here's where we're at as it stands right now. All right, you might call this plan A, or plan F. We're kind of back to the original idea. It's going to be easier underneath in terms of getting through the floor without having frame members or other things in the way. And this is just going to be a lot more convenient. If I put this here, even flush mount, I can barely get the cap off, but it's going to be a little bit of a pain. If I raise it up at all, it gets even harder because the door frame slopes in a little bit as it goes. So I think this is still the best spot. What I was getting hung up on was thinking about putting it in here, and if I get it forward enough that these pipes underneath, can't really see them too good, but those pipes are forward of the step space here. It kind of pokes out a little bit. What occurs to me though is we really don't have any reason to use those the hoses that came with it, the duct hoses, duct work, so we can just let it blow out into the van. It'll be fine. It's kind of in the center of the van. That would be more of a factor, I think, if we were hiding it up under the seat up there. We may want to use the hose to get things around. I can't put it under this cabinet or anything because that's where the gas tank is for the van, as well as the wheel well back there. So I think this will be fine. I already have been thinking about rebuilding this kitchen section. I kind of did it with scraps anyway, so if I rebuilt it, made it just an inch or two fatter, it would be just fine anyway. But in the meantime, this may just poke out an inch or two until we get that adjusted. So I think that's what we're going with. And so I'll go ahead and get things positioned how I want them best and mark it out, and then I'll show you the mounting plate there that we're going to use to install this thing. Okay, so we moved the whole kitchen assembly. I unscrewed everything, had it glued to the wheel well thing, but we moved that whole thing forward about 2 inches, I suppose, 1.5 inches, 2 inches, so that the front of the heater should be right about flush with the front of the cabinets here. This is off a little bit. It's going to be like that when I actually tighten it down. But this is where we're going to go through the floor for the heaters. So I'm going to go ahead and line it up. There we go. That looks out just all perfect. I'm going to mark it so we can go ahead and cut that. Okay, that's where we need our holes. That could be 2 separate holes or 1 bigger hole. It doesn't really matter. Fuel tank will be coming on here and mounted like so, roughly, above the heater. But we're doing it all on the one side here, so we'll have a little bit of storage next to the heater still and next to the fuel tank. So this will be mounted here, but this lets me easily pull up the gas pump, open the doors, and put some fuel in. And I should mention, after I drill these holes out, I'm actually going to put a couple of runners in here, probably wood, maybe metal, to lift this up a little bit. And the reason for that is simply that we're going to have the fuel tank mounted inside, and I need room to get the fuel line on there without it being kinked or pinched. I'm starting with this hole saw for the air intake. When I get to the out, then this is just a little bit bigger than it, so it'll fit fine. I'm going to use this one. It's the only other size I have for when we do the exhaust one, because we're going to have that wrap around the exhaust. So I need room for that, but I also want to make sure that there's a nice gap between that exhaust pipe and the plywood and the laminate here, so we don't melt them down. Apparently need a new battery too. And hopefully this will go through the steel on the floor. We're going to find out. If not, we'll be using a Sawzall or something. There we go. Hey, it did it. All right, we can see right through. Oh, we're right up, almost on top of the frame, but it'll work. Okay, that actually went better than I was expecting. We really got to get this heater in, not just for camping and stuff, but also so that we can warm it up enough in here that the batteries will charge, because we have 3 lithium batteries in here now. One of the things, this diesel heater literally arrived Sunday night via FedEx, and we had to leave on Monday to go out of town for a few days for an inspection job. So I didn't get a chance to put it in before that. I also needed to get new batteries in before I could put it in, because our one remaining AGM battery we had was getting pretty weak. So I just put those in yesterday, and we have 2 new lithium batteries, and now we have plenty of power to run the heater when the sun's not shining with solar. But I also need to be able to get it warm in here so that our lithium batteries in our power station can charge, because they can't charge when it's below freezing. The battery management systems won't let them, to protect the batteries. Otherwise, you could destroy a lithium battery charging it below freezing temperatures. And with lithium batteries, we did go with some very inexpensive a Chinese company. Batteries, we'll have a link in the video description if you want to check them out. Normally, I would not even consider putting cheap Chinese lithium batteries in here, but these were recently reviewed by Will Prowse, and Will Prowse is my go-to guy for solar stuff. Just like Mobile Internet Resource Center is my go-to for all things mobile internet. But Will Prowse reviewed these things, did a whole bunch of testing on them, literally cut them apart and looked at the insides, and he said they're his new favorite cheap batteries. So we decided to try them. And when I say cheap, I mean we got a Black Friday sale. It was just over $300. I think like $309 or something for two 100 amp hour lithium batteries with the low temperature protection and overcurrent protection and all the rest that you would expect. Everything except for a battery heater in them. So very inexpensive. The AGMs that we're replacing were $300 or $400 a piece for AGMs. So we got two of these lithiums for the price of an AGM. And if you look at some of the good brand name lithium batteries, they're like $800 or $1,000 for one 100 amp hour battery. Beautiful thing about these things, aside from all the extra performance you get out of them, is they're super light. Like I can pick it up one-handed, no problem. So really nice feature there. They're installed. I didn't film that 'cause it's kind of, pretty boring just swapping out batteries, but we got them in, they're working. So we'll update you on that in a few months or, whatever, when we have a chance to see how they're working. But meanwhile, they are in. We'll have a link in the description if you want to check out some very affordable lithium batteries. I'm going to drill this thing through and then get back to the hole saw. All right, let's finish up this hole, huh? Whoops, there we go. We're losing that thing again. There we go, we're through. All right, and we did not hit anything underneath. Beautiful. Okay, so there's our plate on there, and let's make sure this is all going to fit, right? Oh, I need room. Okay, the fuel line's catching. Okay, that's not a problem because I'm going to raise this up on blocks a little bit, so that won't go through there because that little nipple for the fuel line is catching right there. So, but looking at the template here, it does fit very nicely, so perfectly positioned. So I'm going to go see if I can find a couple of like 8-inch blocks, and that'll run along the side here on either side, and then this will be on here. All right, found a couple of 2x3 blocks. They're a little taller than I need, but they should do the job anyways. I'll cut them down a bit, but that'll basically just get that up a little bit for me. All right, so we're just going to cut these down. I guess I'll go about 9 inches, 8 or 9 inches, but I'm going with 9, just to mount that plate onto. Now, next step is we need to mount our plate here. And there's some nuts in the box somewhere that we need to put on these things. And then the plate gets screwed down. And these are knurled to help hold them tight. That's like an alternative to doing a lock washer or officially, or, it's kind of a locking nut, more or less. All right, I'll read my inspection tool vest. These are a couple of Crescent brand tools. These are nifty. I carry these along for inspections for when I just need something other than a screwdriver. It'll loosen a panel on a furnace or something like that, electrical cover. So this should do the job for this. I don't want to crank on these, just kind of snug them down a little bit so they're, make sure they stay tight. So, all right, that one's good. I do have real wrenches I could go dig out too, but this is quicker and easier for this project. All right, that ought to do it, I guess. Well, that is on there. Now we'll put the other stuff on and then we'll screw it down to the... Hopefully I have a long enough extension to screw these ones back here down. That's kind of a little snug. Now we need 3 things on here. We need fresh air intake that we're going to put a little filter thing on the other end of after it's through the floor, of course. And we need our exhaust, which is going to go through the floor, of course, and we'll deal with all that from then, straighten it out as we need to. And this will have the exhaust silencer or muffler on it. So we'll clamp them on, and then I need to get a fuel line attached with a clamp as well. And the fuel line, of course, we don't know exactly how long we want it to be. So we'll just put the end on and leave it long until we figure it out. But that way we can set this thing down and figure out how it's supposed to look. So, and these do not fit on the others, so they only fit on one way. So, I mean, this is bigger, so it would go on here, but it's loose. So it fits on there nicely. This goes on here, but the exhaust will not go on the intake. You'd have to really shove. So that's actually a nice little design thing. So you cannot, without trying, you cannot assemble it wrong. Not to say you could not assemble it wrong if you tried, but without trying. The little nipple for the fuel supply here, it is flared on the end. So the line will hopefully fit on there nicely and seal up good when I put a clamp on. The clamps are not the greatest with these, so I may eventually get around to replacing clamps, but for today, I don't want to do all that. Some people also replace the fuel lines with better, higher quality stuff, but again, we're just getting going for now. We may upgrade some of the components later on, but for right now, I'll settle for just getting it going and working. We'll make sure everything works before I worry too much about any other details. It's a little bit of a snug fit. You might have an easier time with it if you lube it up a little with some diesel or something, but I don't have a diesel yet. I have to go to the store and get diesel when we get this all working. So I'll loosen up this little spring clamp and, oops, slide it down over that flared part so that there we go. And that'll hopefully help hold it there. It seems pretty snug, so over time I would be concerned if maybe it would loosen up, but for now it looks good. So we'll put some other stuff on here. We need some hose clamps for the, there we go, hose clamps for these. You'll have to forgive me if it seems like I'm hurrying a bit. I'm trying to get, the sun's getting low in the horizon, so I'm trying to get this project as done as possible. And again, if you didn't make a big hole, if you just cut a hole for this, this would also be in the way. So because we're sitting it on blocks 1.5 inches up in the air, we won't have any trouble with that. We definitely want to make sure this is secured so it doesn't come loose and let diesel exhaust into the van in the interior. Now, see if we can stick these things through the floor, huh? Make sure everything's going to fit here. Oh, it's catching on the frame down there. I have to go underneath and get that out of the way. There we go. Of course, this is a power cable we'll have to keep out of the way so nothing happens to it. And I gotta figure out how I want to run this around. Something like that to the fuel tank here so that we don't have to worry about touching the exhaust in the back. It fits, so I think we just need to put some exhaust wrap on it and then we'll reinstall it. All right, pull this thing back out one more time. Now let's check out this exhaust sock thingy-majiggy. The exhaust pipe installation sleeve must be installed in the exhaust pipe according to the following installation method to effectively reduce surface temperature fire hazards caused by improper installation. Well, there's our picture. There's not really any directions beyond that. And it does come with 2 hose clamps, so I guess they want us to clamp it on. I'll set this in position, then I'll find the booklet that came with this and see if there's any better details in the booklet. And like I was saying earlier, I was actually planning on going to, well, I think I was saying it earlier, I was planning on grabbing some exhaust wrap from a auto parts store anyway, so this is just kind of a bonus that this is included. Hopefully this will go through our hole in the floor. Another reason you need a big hole, I guess. There we go. All right. And these things, from my understanding here, these things do get quite warm, the exhaust on these things. So probably not a bad thing to have some protection on it to keep it from burning anything. That is why even with this, that's why I went with a bigger hole. in the floor for the exhaust, just to make sure that there's some breathing room there. So, all right, I guess that's it. I'm just going to tighten this thing down and see how it works. Throw another clamp up here on the end. I'm not too worried about under the vehicle anyways, but leave some room there for our handy dandy muffler. There we go. All right, now we'll try and get it down through the floor again. Oh yeah, that goes through our big hole. All right, that worked out. Oh, it's gonna get, oh no, it's gonna go this time. Yeah, it went this time. All right, okay. There may be a draft from those holes. We'll deal with something with that later as far as sealing that up goes. Now we're going to need a fuel filter in here and the fuel pump. I'm going to mount these in addition to getting the fuel tank in there. This here is for the fuel pump. And it does have an arrow showing you the direction of flow. You may not be able to see it on the camera, but that shows you the direction of flow. And this is an electrical connection for powering the fuel pump. So you do want to mount these. They like to be on like a 30 to 45 degree angle. They work more efficiently that way. So we're going to do that. And hopefully this little rubber mount will help with any noise issues with these things. If it's annoyingly noisy, we'll work on it. There's some things we can try to quiet it down. But until we find out, right now I'm just trying to get it installed and working. Then we can worry about any improvements we want to make. Because this is breaking 50 today here, and it's getting cold and some more snow coming. So we really got to get this part of the build done and get on to the other things. But once this is done, at least we can work on the van inside with heat. Well, it's holding it snugly anyway, I'll say that. There, it's on there. So grab one of these little less than impressive fuel line clamps that I'm sure I'll end up replacing eventually. But now, a little piece of fuel line so we can put the fuel filter on the other end. All right, direction of flow is this way. The fat one comes in this way and out this way, at least on this fuel filter. It might be different on yours, but there is an arrow on this one to indicate direction of flow. So, need to connect the fuel line here, then we'll have to connect it onto the fuel pump as well. Might be as far as that one's going on, I guess. I think it's flared and gets fatter as it goes. So, all right, we don't need this to be too long. It's coming down from the top, so I think we'll position it sort of this way. And I'll probably attach this to the wall too, instead of just leaving it dangling. Although I don't think it'll hurt anything if it's dangling. You might need strong fingers for this. All right, if we can get this thing on now. And like I was saying earlier, you can get these things in a little toolbox style thing or a little case, and you don't have to worry about all this stuff, or most of this stuff, because the fuel stuff will all be connected for you anyway. So there, all right. So there's that. Now we need to get our fuel tank installed. Now there's 3 holes here through the tank, and we're gonna use these to mount the tank. Then we also need to, before we do that, we need to drill a hole in the bottom here so that we can get the fuel out of it. But I need to get the orientation right. There we go. This is the right orientation. So we want to drill in this one. So it's going to sit in here like so. I'll just mark it so I don't get it confused again. And there's some hardware that, of course, that we need to install. With that, here it is. Okay, so this is the fitting that goes into the tank. And it actually goes in from the inside. So we got to drill it out first and install it from the inside of the tank. And it'll come out like that with an O-ring on here inside the tank. And we'll put another O-ring on the outside. And then we'll put a nut on it to retain it all. And then we'll connect the fuel line here. And then we'll mount it all onto the plywood. So this should be 5/16, I think. Obviously, I'm going to double check that before I drill a hole in here, because there's no going back from that. Quarter looks a little small, but we're going to start with a 1/4 inch. And then we'll go up to 5/16 if we need to. So well, we're playing it safe, because I don't want to have to try and find a new fuel tank. So. This might be more nerve-wracking than cutting the roof off the van. And I do need to get some new drill bits. These are crazy dull. Yep, a little bit tight. So we'll go with a 5/16. I thought that was going to be the case, but you can always drill it bigger. You can't drill it smaller. Yeah, that'll go through there just nicely. So obviously we have to from inside. I'm just checking from the outside to make sure that it's going to fit, and it is. So now we have to get it out of there because it doesn't want to come back out. There we go. All right. A few ways you can do this probably. I've seen people use a wire. I've also seen people use fuel line, which is actually an attempt. And you want to get all the crud out of the tank, because you just when you drill that out, we introduce crud. So all right. Hopefully that's all of it. Now, like I said, we got a couple ways we can do this. I'm going to take advantage of this fuel line I've got right here and try it that way. Whichever way you do this, what you have to do is feed something through here, through this hole, and out the cap, the fill hole here, because we have to be able to fish this thing through. You can use like a piece of wire or something too. I might have to use something else just to get this thing to feed through, so because it's wanting to curl around in circles. This might just do to go in and grab it and fish it for it. See if we can grab that fuel line. It's getting caught on these areas. So let's see if we can hook onto this and drag it out. Oh, almost. There we go. There we go. That'll do. All right, now what we're going to do is take our little fitting here and put it on the fuel line, or put the fuel line on it, whichever way you want to say that. And then we have to drag this thing back through and out this hole that we drilled from the inside. Oh, hold on. I forgot the O-ring. That would not be good. We need an O-ring here to seal it up. So we'll get this O-ring on for the inside. There we go. Beautiful. All right, so now we'll put it back on the fuel line and drag it through. Oh, come on, you. You know you want to do it. All right, I'm going to use my little pliers here to pull this through, and then I'll nip off the end of the fuel line before I attempt to reuse it, so it's not. All right, there we go. Now, get that off there. Put an O-ring on the outside. All right, so now we'll just put our nut on there. I notice this one is not knurled. It's got a little recessed cavity, though, to accommodate the O-ring. So put this on. And we want to snug it down, but we don't want to destroy the O-ring. So that's the trick there. Do it without destroying the O-ring. All right, hopefully that's going to be good. If it's a problem, I'll tighten it down more, but I don't want to over tighten it and damage something. All right, so now we need a fuel line from this to the other end of the fuel filter, and the fuel system will be ready to, we'll just screw this in and the fuel system will be ready to go. I'm going to trim this off since I used pliers on it. Don't want to take a chance on that being weakened or damaged. All right, another fuel clamp thingy-majiggy. There we go. Yeah, that's on there good, I think. All right, so when we install this in here, I'll put this lid back on so I don't get any dirt in here. I'll attach the fuel line and then we'll figure out exactly how we want to mount this thing. Obviously, we want to filter, just like on your car or truck, you want to filter, or van, RV, whatever you're driving. You want to filter the fuel before it gets to where it's going so that things don't get plugged up if there's some debris or particulate matter mixed in with the fuel. In this case, we're also doing it before we get to the pump so that, again, we don't damage the pump if we end up with crud in our fuel, which can happen sometimes. So, all right, there too. I may actually shorten up some of these fuel lines. Not right this minute, but I may shorten up some of these fuel lines because they're a little bit longer than I need now that everything's in and I can see it a little better. Yep, I'm going through. Gotta find a shorter screw. I need to put the muffler on here, but everything's connected. Now we're just gonna run the electrical. And these are all 3 different connectors too. So you don't have to worry about accidentally plugging them in the wrong way. They only go to one thing. And we do have a inline fuse here too, which is good. I'm actually running this straight off the fuse block, so it doesn't matter, but it's good that they include this, I guess. There we go. Got a fuse in it. 20 amp it says. Thing's only rated for up to 15 amps at startup, and it may not always even pull that much. But so this goes to the fuse block in your battery or whatever you're connecting it to. With a little luck, we may even have enough wire to get back there. I may not have to find more wire, which would be nice. A little bit of a tangled mess right now, though. There we go. That's for this one. And then we have a controller, and we have a fuel pump. 3-pin is for the controller. So I'll want to run this up here somewhere. Wherever we want to put that. And this one's going to be for the fuel pump. It's got a little spring there, the metal tab, and pushing it down will open it up and release it. So I'm going to push it down to connect it, and if we need to remove it in the future, I'll push it down to release it and unplug it. I may have to reposition this thing a little bit. I don't know. I also have there we go. The hose clamp's a little bit in the way too. Okay, that's on. Okay. I'm just connecting the filter on the air intake here and the muffler thingy on the exhaust. Try and route these so that they're not too close together to each other, so that when it's sucking in fresh air, it's not getting exhaust stuff already. And then the exhaust, I guess we'll bring up this way a bit. I don't want to dump it under the van. Like I said, there's a little vent here. We want to keep that down so any condensation that does accumulate in there can drain out and doesn't rust out the fancy chrome muffler. They got a nice hole there already. That might be a good spot to mount the muffler, I guess. That's not any lower than anything else under here, like the regular engine exhaust muffler or differential or anything, so we shouldn't have to worry about hitting it on anything. Bello, do you want to step back and see how it looks from a distance, if that looks okay hanging there? Or I can try and hide it up a little more otherwise, but... Alright. That's up there out of the way, I guess. The exhaust, quite a ways away from the exhaust, so... I was also trying to keep it up so that hopefully it's less likely to get dirt and snow and ice and stuff built up on it, because that can be a problem, because it'll plug up your intake and your heater won't run. So hopefully being tucked up well out of the way like that, that will not be a problem. The power and the thermostat, that's all that's left. Or the temp controller, whatever you want to call it. And then we'll have to get some diesel, because I don't have any diesel. All right, so I'm just changing the ring terminals. The ones they had on there were really big, like if you were putting it onto a battery or something. And these are, I'm putting smaller ones that'll fit on our fuse block. There's a tag on here that says, 15 amp power supply. Supply voltage, 12 volt, 15 amp. Or greater than 15 amp, I guess it says. There's a fuse in it they include, this 20 amp. I've heard of people trying to run these on power stations and having trouble with it, for the simple reason that those 12 volt cigarette outlet lighter things are typically going to be limited to 10 amps to avoid overheating the plug-in receptacle, or the plug-in the device. So you may or may not be able to run one of these on a portable power station unless you're running through an adapter off the AC power. So you may have to run it hooked onto a battery or into the fuse block connected to a battery, like what we're doing. So just a heads up, if you're thinking you're going to run it on a power station, it might work, it might not work, but just to, it might be a problem. So we're going to finish hooking these things up, and then everything's ready to go. We just need to go to run down to the gas station, get some diesel. I'll do a little tidying up another day, getting the wires nicely routed and clean and getting the fuel lines tidied up and everything, but that's for another day. For today, we're going to call it quits, except for going to get some diesel and see if this thing works as soon as I finish connecting these. All right, so we're all connected to power there. I just got to pop a fuse in it and get it ready to go. That 15 amps I was mentioning, that's when it's on startup. It's going to be pulling 10, 12, 15 amps because it's running the glow plug to try and warm up the combustion chamber. Once it's up and running, it takes quite a bit less power. So they really sips the electricity and the diesel once it's up and going. Anyway, I think we're all set here, so we're going to have to go find some diesel and see if we can get this thing tested, see how it works. I'll pick up my mess, and then we'll run down to the fuel station. All right, we're going to go run and get some diesel. We got everything picked up. I'm kind of done in. It's been a long day. It's cold, getting cold. It was nice for a while, but it's getting cold. And I've been crawling around on the ground and bending and all kinds of stuff, so I'm feeling it a little bit. We'll go see what we can find for fuel. Hopefully we don't have any leaks. And if everything looks good, we'll try turning this sucker on and see how it goes. I'm just admiring this moon up here. I thought I'd read that it was like 90-something% tonight and maybe full tomorrow, but it looks sort of full too, so I don't know. I'll have to check if that's the full moon or if it's almost a full moon. But it's pretty in any case, and it's bright, and it's nice to have clear skies, because we get a lot of clouds here in Wyoming, particularly in the evening and particularly during the winter. So a lot of times we don't see the stuff like this. The season's upon us. Yeah, there's quite a few Christmas lights around Gillette this year, which is fun. That is one thing I miss when I'm in the desert at Christmas time. There's like basically no Christmas lights. We did go once to Parker, Arizona to their little Christmas parade, which was a whole lot of fun, and we got to see some lights and things, so that was a blast.
Alright, so pardon all the traffic noise. We're gonna get some diesel. We're obviously going to start off with just a little bit in and make sure it's not like leaking, and that, cause that's going to be a problem if it is. And if it looks okay, I'll probably get like half a tank, about a gallon or so. It's a 10-liter tank, so I'll probably get about a gallon tonight, just to, again, give a chance to get everything working before I fill it. Okay, here goes nothing. Melanie, you'll have to help me look for any leaks. I don't think we'll have a problem. I got everything on there pretty tight, but I don't see anything leaking, so I guess we'll put about a gallon in. And we think there's a place in town that has red dye diesel, so we may try and grab some of that in the future. It's a little bit cheaper because we're not using it for on the road. But for tonight, we know where this place is and it's convenient, so good old Maverick stop. Well, hopefully I got that fixed now. We had a little mishap with the fitting on the bottom of the tank not being quite tight. It was leaking a bit. So hopefully that's good to go. Now, sometimes you have to prime these things to get the line clear of air and to get the fuel all the way up to the burn chamber. It'll do an auto prime usually, but then if that doesn't work, you have to manually prime it. I believe I'll check the manual on this one, but a lot of times you push the up and down together to get it to prime. It looks like it's been running here. We got fuel in the line, we got fuel in the filter, so I'm gonna try turning this on and just see if it primes itself. And yeah, we got 6 temperature settings. And you see the fans turning there. I think that one there tells us the glow plugs are on. Maybe there's that one. I'll have to read the manual and figure out the details, but you know. We do have a clock. There's supposed to be some programmable settings. But we'll play with all that later on. There it goes. Now the fuel pump's on. Minor blunder. This manual is better than some, but I'll tell you what, it's still confusing as heck. I can't make any sense. I don't see any explanation there on what the various icons on here on the controller screen mean, and we just figured out that it's blowing backwards, which is to say I put it in backwards. And this side is the air return. And these 4 weird holes on this side are, man, they're the heat output, and I can't even hold my hand in front of it. It's hot, so. All right, it's working. We've got a couple minor drips that I'll get fixed tomorrow when it's daylight again. And apparently I'll turn the thing around because I got it in backwards, so that's unfortunate. Nice hot dry heat, so I'm going to shut it down for tonight. Just press and hold the power button and it says it's turning off. I can tell that much, so we'll let it shut down. I think I've got the drip mostly fixed, but we'll leave it paper towels under just in case. We'll fix the rest up tomorrow. I'll get some better clamps tomorrow as well, so we can clamp those lines down better, because that's part of the trouble I'm having, is just not clamping down good on the fuel filter. And apparently I'm going to turn it around so it's actually blowing into the interior space instead of blowing at the door, so which I guess would work eventually, but not really ideal. So that'll be tomorrow's project. We'll turn it around. Well, it's an adventure, but it does work, and it's blowing nice hot air, so that's pretty good. So we'll get this thing turned around. Not too exciting, and you can see tomorrow after we get it turned around how it looks, and we'll get some measurements on temperature differentials and that sort of stuff. Show you how it's actually performing. So that's it for tonight. It's a couple days later. Everything's reinstalled. What I did was I took the heater out and flipped it around so it's blowing the correct direction. This is where the air comes back in, passes through over the heat exchanger and out the front out of those 4 jets that are kind of goofy looking. Like I said, I was not clear on the manual. It was pretty simple, other than having to bore out the hole where the exhaust goes out, because I don't want to touch on plywood, and I'd done the bigger hole the other side. So I flipped that around, no big deal. We redid all the plumbing. This is actually what took a few days, and we just did it all this afternoon in a couple hours. It wasn't like it. The problem is we had to find new clamps, and I've seen pretty much everybody who has experienced these that I've seen, like doing videos and stuff about it, they all said replace the clamps. Well, I didn't get replacement clamps ahead of time, so I didn't have the package open to see what I needed, and I thought, well, we'll start with these and I'll just find some replacement clamps. Well, we needed replacement clamps immediately because the fuel filter line was leaking. The line where it goes on the fuel filter was leaking. The clamp were not cutting it. They were just grossly inadequate. The problem was finding clamps. We went to like everywhere. We went to several different hardware stores. And for the record, our local Home Depot, our local Menards, which is sort of like a Home Depot and Walmart mix, our local Tractor Supply, they all carry fuel line that's the right size. I think it's for like small engines, but they all carry fuel line. None of them carried clamps that would fit this. So we finally ended up at a local auto parts store. They had some that are iffy. They go down that far, but we're like all the way down. It's 1/4 inch outside diameter line, so you might have to get something like that on Amazon, or maybe your local hardware store or parts store could order it in for you. We found some fuel system line clamps at Harbor Freight, which Harbor Freight also had the fuel line. They had clamps for fuel lines in your vehicles that were the right size, but they were some weird clamp on them that I didn't have a tool for. And then the ones that had screws or sockets, they were too big. So all that to say, it was a bit of a challenge finding clamps. That was the problem. That's what took us a few days. So it's all back in. We're going to pick up all of our tools and mess, and then we're going to hop in and fire it up again and see how it works. It did work the first time. It just was leaking out of that fitting, and it was blowing at the door. So we're going to fire it up again and see how it works now that we've got it running, blowing the right direction. So we're going to go ahead and measure the temperature. We want to see how hot this thing gets, what kind of output it's got. The fuel pump's running right now, so it's priming it up. It's going to do some air in the lines, so hopefully it'll do the auto prime like it did before, and picking up the pace. We're also hoping that thing won't be too noisy when it's actually running. Okay, so we had a E10 error when we tried to start it up. I looked in the book, and there's actually several different fault code tables, and I finally found one that said it's a failure to start up fault, so which I'm not super surprised about, because there was air in the line. I could see air bubbles when the fuel pump was running, and we did have lost a lot of fuel out of there when I was replumbing everything. So we had to let it finish its cycle and the fan blowing to cool down, and then I just restarted it. So we'll see if it lights up this time. It did light the first time, so that's when we put it in. So that's the good thing. I know that it does work. Okay, it's a cold day and it is warming up in here. Things are working finally. So a few observations. First of all, we'll update you in the future about our more long-term experience using this heater, how it holds up, how it performs over the long term. In the short term, it is working. It's a little bit noisier than I would like. I don't hear the fuel pump quite as much. I more hear the blower and the combustion occurring. I don't think it's any louder than like an RV furnace, or definitely not any louder than a house furnace. So I guess it's just the nature of the beast on that, but it is blowing nice hot air out of there. My thermal imaging camera is showing more than 300 degrees at the exit, so where it's coming out. So that's pretty respectable. That's a lot hotter than we're going to get out of a typical forced air furnace in your house. So that's really cool. A few things to point out that I want to point out in case you're thinking about getting one of these things. First off, I recommend buying it from Amazon if you're going to get one, because they have a much better return policy if there are problems with a unit, because the quality control is really not all that amazing on these things. Secondly, the manuals are somewhere between worthless and almost worthless. It's just not very helpful. Most of the stuff I had to figure out myself. Sometimes you can get a clue from the manual, but the manual we have with this one, and it's better. This one's better than some as far as the manual goes. But it's like this covers like a half dozen different models of heaters, and there are differences between them, and there are things you really need to know that are not explained in the manual. So, for example, which direction does the heater blow? So you don't put it in backwards. So that's not ever identified in the manual. There's never a picture of this unit saying this is the way it works. The fuel pump, I had some trouble with the fuel pump because I put it in backwards. Because again, there's no manual, there's no documentation in the manual about that. So there is a arrow on it marked on one end of it, and the arrow indicates fuel direction. So watch for that little arrow that's kind of etched in there, and you want that pointing towards the heater, away from the fuel tank. That's not anywhere in there, and I missed that little detail and put the pump in backwards mistakenly, and I kept getting air bubbles. So I'm sitting there looking at it going, wait a minute, the air bubbles are coming up from the heater. There shouldn't be that much air in the line. So I figured it out, switched it around, and then it fired right up on the first attempt after that. The fitting on the bottom of the fuel tank, where it comes out, you connect the line to, there's O-rings on either side, on the inside and on the outside. You saw us putting that together. You have to tighten the O-rings down enough that they don't leak, but not so much that you crush the O-rings. And when I first installed it, I did not get them tightened down enough, and so we had some leakage from that spot. Clamps, if you're going to do one of these, you just have to find new clamps, because the clamps are worthless. Now, some of them may hold up okay for a period of time, I don't know, but in our case, we had one that was absolutely not working, and we had a leak at the fuel filter. So plan on having to replace those. All in all, is this a good unit? Well, it's working, and it's really cranking out the heat. So I appreciate that. It does vent outside, and it has a fresh air return for combustion. The combustion exhaust gas vents outside, and the fresh air for the combustion is drawn in from outside. So that's a good thing. I like that. That was definitely, after the Mr. Heater experience, that was definitely something I wanted, was a vented heating system. One thing about outside, if you think you're going to be stealth camping or anything and running this heater, it sounds a little bit like a small jet engine, where the exhaust is shooting out of the thing, even with the muffler on it. So if anybody walks by this van or any rig you got one of these heaters installed in, they're definitely going to know you got the heater running or something's going on, because you can hear it. Other than that, it's like I said, it's working. We'll let you know how it goes long term. Would I recommend this? I'm actually happy with how it's working right now that we got it in. I would only recommend this to somebody who's comfortable messing around with this sort of stuff and troubleshooting things on their own, and maybe having to get on YouTube or whatever and look for tutorials about it. There are, most of these things, as far as what I've seen, they're all substantially the same, but there are little differences between them. And so that can throw you for a loop. So if you're going to try one of these, I think you have to ask yourself if you're comfortable messing around with things, and if you're going to be frustrated when, that the manual doesn't tell you what you need to know, and it doesn't identify parts clearly, and it doesn't provide some really important information like how to set the thing up. So for some people, this may just not be a good option. I don't know if the better ones like Webasto's and S-Bars and those things, if they have better manuals, one would hope. They may send you better hardware, one would hope, but I don't know that for a fact. I wanted to try this For one thing, it's 90 something dollars instead of more than $1,000. So there's that factor. But also, I just wanted to try it because, you know, I've been hearing about them. I know people who have used them. I've, you know, obviously seen them all over the internet and everything. And I thought, you know, I want to try it out and see what my firsthand experience is with it. So we did get it done. The initial install was not as bad as I thought. Had we not had defective clamps and had I not installed the darn thing backwards so it was blowing at the door instead of inside, that would have been great. A lot of these I've seen, instead of having the 4 jets for to blow the warm air out like this one does, they have one single fitting that can either you can put a hose on or you can dial it to deflect the air different directions. This one, they're coming straight out unless we put these little hoses on it. I did put one of these on just to test it, and it does blow well out the other end of it, but you have to bend them and they're pretty stiff and they don't want to stay bent. So you'd have to like secure it somewhere to keep it blowing whatever direction you wanted it to blow. But we'll keep using this thing. We're going to be traveling soon and we'll definitely be using it then. And we'll let you know how it goes. We'll also be monitoring, give you an idea of what our experience is with fuel consumption, how much diesel it takes to run this thing. But it's cranking away on high right now. I just went in and had some dinner, let it run, came back out, and it's definitely warming up the van. So I am pleased with it. I'm satisfied with it. And yeah, there were some challenges with it, but to be honest with you, I fully expected some challenges. I knew what I was getting into. I knew enough people who had had these things, and I'd seen enough videos and reviews and installation videos and things that I knew there were going to be some challenges, and I did know what I was getting into. It was not a surprise as far as that goes. So I don't have any complaints. It was frustrating at times that things weren't working as expected, but again, it was not a surprise. So you'll see us using this thing in future videos, and we'll definitely check back in with you in the future about how it's working. But I just kind of wanted to share. Those are my initial impressions and reactions after unboxing the thing, getting it installed, and a few adjustments to get it working properly so it's not leaking or anything, and everything's working as it's supposed to. But for right now, I'm just sitting here warming my toes up, and that is nice on a cold evening.